Teams MS700. I'm Monica from TechnoFocus, and I will be serving as your moderator today. We're glad to have Johan Nickel with us, who will be presenting today's session. He is a certified Microsoft 365 trainer and passionate senior cloud solution architect with great experience in developing and integrating applications with Azure Active Directory. He is currently based in Switzerland. If you happen to face any audio or video issues during the webcast or have any technical questions, please post them in the Q&A panel and our team is here to help you. Now I'd like to turn today's event over to our presenter. Johan, you have the floor now.
Hi and a great welcome of Day 3. My name is Jochen Nickel. Today we will focus specifically on the upgrading scenarios from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams. In the first section of this module, we will go through the different upgrade scenarios. The upgrading from Skype for Business to Teams is more than a technical migration. It represents a transformation in how users communicate and collaborate, and the change is not always easy in that part. The ideal upgrade approach should address the technical aspects of your upgrade as well as the encourage of user acceptance and adoption of Teams to drive a positive user experience and business outcome realization. It's basically recommended that the transition from Skype for Business to Teams be performed in stages. So there is a specific upgrade framework as well for Microsoft available, and I highly recommend also, beside of this course material, to review the specific options, what you get and what you can do. And it's important to understand how the two applications, specifically Skype for Business and Microsoft Teams, coexist. As Microsoft Teams extends the capabilities of Skype for Business and bringing together chat, meeting, calling, collaboration, app integrations, file storage and a single interface, and Microsoft Teams built the new central hub for teamwork, you really need to have a specific path and building blocks to migrate from the Skype for Business infrastructure to Microsoft Teams. And specifically, you will need to analyze your existing environment and deployed functionalities and start to understand your business requirements and evaluate compatibility of all existing solutions and devices for moving to Teams. Considering the overlapped functionalities between the solutions, you may need to review the available coexistence and upgrade modes in order to determine which path is appropriate for your organization. For example, you may decide to introduce Teams to target users with selected Teams features before rolling out to the whole organization. You would then use the outcome from the pilot project to assess the most appropriate upgrade path for your organization. But keep in mind that having the option to upgrade does not mean that your organization is ready for this upgrade. And it's recommended that you first ensure that your network is ready to support Teams and develop an adoption plan really prior to the upgrading users to Teams. Specifically, upgrading from Skype for Business on-premises is a bit more complicated. So in addition to setting a coexistence mode, administrators like you will also need to configure a hybrid connectivity with your Microsoft 365 tenant. So those users can communicate and interoperate with the existing team users. On the other hand, obviously, when we plan the transition, you will need to get yourself really familiar with the various modes, concepts and terminologies relevant to the upgrading for Skype for Business to Teams. You really need to know the Skype for Business only topic, because in this coexistence mode, users remain in the Skype for Business, not Teams for chat, meeting and calling capabilities, and they do not use Teams for Teams and channels. This specific mode can be used prior to starting a managed deployment of Teams to prevent users from starting to use Teams ahead of having built user readiness. This can also be used as a way to enable authenticated participants in Teams meetings for Skype for Business users provided the users are licensed for Teams, for example. We have also the island mode, which is a coexistence mode that's specifically called islands. And each of the client applications operates as a separate island. So Skype for Business talks to Skype for Business and Teams talks to Teams. Users are expected to run really both clients at all time and can communicate natively in the client from which the communication was initiated. On the other hand, we have the Skype for Business with Teams, the S4B with Teams collab option. In this specific mode, Skype for Business is left unchanged for chat, calling and meeting capabilities, and the Teams collaboration capabilities like Teams and channels, and the access to files in Office 365 and applications are added. That's a specific point in that. So Teams communications capabilities like private chat, calling and scheduling meetings are off by default in this specific mode. This mode is a valid first step for an organization that still relies on Skype for Business and that want to provide a first insight into the collaboration capabilities of Teams for their users, for example. On the other hand, we have the Skype for Business with Teams, S4B with Teams collab and meetings. In this mode, the private chat and calling remain on Skype for Business, and users will use the Teams to schedule and conduct their meetings, along with using Teams for Teams and channel-based conversations in this mode. This mode is also known as Meetings First solution. This coexisting mode is especially useful for organizations with Skype for Business on-premise deployments with enterprise voice, as I mentioned before, who are likely to take some time to upgrade to Teams and want to benefit from the superior Teams meetings as soon as possible. And on the other hand, we have the Teams only. Obviously, a Teams only user, also called as an upgraded user, has access to all capabilities in Teams. And they may retain the Skype for Business clients to join meetings on Skype for Business that have been organized by non-upgraded users or external parties, for example. That's a very important topic that you really know this in case of the upgrading process to Microsoft Teams. In this slide we see an example of the coexisting mode of Teams and Skype for Business. For example, when a user is in any of the Skype for Business modes, as I explained before, like Skype for Business only, Skype for Business with Teams collab, Skype for Business with Teams collab and meetings, all incoming chats and calls are routed to the user's Skype for Business client. So to avoid end-user confusion and ensure a proper routing, calling and chat functionality in the Teams clients are disabled in the Skype for Business modes. So similarly, the meeting scheduling in Teams is explicitly disabled when users are in the Skype for Business only or in the Skype for Business with Teams collab modes, and explicitly enabled when a user is in the Skype for Business with Teams collab and meetings mode. Because presence indicates when a user is reachable through chat and calling. When chat and calling are disabled, self-presence in Teams, that is showing whether a user is available in the user's picture, is also hidden in this mode. If your organization is upgrading from Skype for Business on-premises, you need to set up your hybrid connectivity between Skype for Business server and Teams or Skype for Business online. So setting up the hybrid connectivity is the first step in your move from your on-premise environments to the cloud. The team users who also use on-premises Skype for Business side by side cannot interoperate with Skype for Business users nor communicate with users in federated organizations from their Teams client itself. So to gain this functionality in Teams, these users must be moved from Skype for Business on-premises to the cloud, which requires you to configure Skype for Business hybrid mode. For the best experience, these users should be in Teams only mode. So this ensures all the incoming calls and chats from Skype for Business or Teams land in the user's Team client itself. Setting up the hybrid connectivity and moving all users to the cloud is also required before you decommission your on-premise Skype for Business deployment. With the hybrid connectivity setup, you can choose to move your users to the cloud based on your schedule and business needs. So with direct routing, you can leverage your on-premises voice infrastructure while you move to the cloud and after your migration is complete. That's really you need to think about this specific experience, that you gather all the necessary information for that. And if you see this on the screen itself, you have the diagram exactly for this environment, that you can see it in the upper front with the Skype for Business online Teams and Azure AD, and from your on-premise infrastructure where you need to use Azure Active Directory Connect to synchronize your users to the Azure Active Directory, and then you can move in a hybrid mode to your Skype for Business server users to the Skype for Business online and Teams environment. That's the capability you really need to have in this mechanism. In the following diagram, you see the different steps you need to go to specifically build up the hybrid connectivity that enables you to move the on-premises users to Teams or Skype for Business online, and enables your users to take the advantage of the cloud service itself. First of all, you need to create a tenant account for Office 365. So that's the first step, to have an Office 365 environment in place. The second step is to add your domain to your Office 365 organization and verify the ownership. So you must add specifically your domain to your Office 365 organization, and you need to validate it over DNS entry or an MX entry. Then you need to build up the Active Directory synchronization that keeps your on-premises Active Directory continuously synchronized with Office 365. This lets you create synchronized versions of each user account and group. Very important is that you need to synchronize the AD accounts for all Skype for Business users in your organization between your on-premises and online deployments. Even if users are not moved to Teams or Skype for Business online. If you don't synchronize all the users, the communication between on-premises and online users in your organization may basically not work as expected. Then there are 3 basic steps to build up your configuration for Skype for Business Hybrid. First of all, you need to configure your on-premises environment to federate with Office 365. The second step is to configure your on-premise environment to trust Office 365 and enable shared zip address space with Office 365 itself. And the third part is to enable shared zip address space in your Office 365 organization. In addition, if you have Exchange on-premises, then you may want to configure OAuth between your Exchange on-premises and Skype for Business online environments. And the last step is to move the pilot users. So after you have really completed all the steps to prepare and configure your environment for Teams or Skype for Business online, you can really start moving pilot users to your online Office 365 organization. So these are the basic steps you really need to go ahead to start all the steps to need to migrate. The first step you need to do in planning your journey to Teams is to really discover your current environment. So the environmental discovery allows you to evaluate all the aspects of your IT infrastructure, like networking and the operations, to ensure that your organization is really ready to implement Microsoft Teams. A detailed discovery of your environment helps you specifically to better understand its current state and reveals any difficulties or possible blockers to the execution of your Teams rollout. The environmental discovery includes a network readiness assessment to ensure your network can support the upgrade itself. So all matters related to your existing collaboration infrastructure and the Microsoft 365 tenant, networking, endpoints, operations, and the adoption and readiness that are included as part of the environmental discovery questionnaire. So basically the discovery questionnaire covers the following information: your Microsoft 365 tenant details, your existing collaboration platform summary, your collaboration platform deployment details, your networking and access to Microsoft 365, services in specific, or the endpoints, the operations, and the adoption and readiness to go forward. Teams combines multiple Microsoft 365 and Office 365 services, as we already heard about, and is therefore dependent on the correct implementation and operation of these specific services. These services include but aren't limited to SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, and OneDrive for Business. Although not all services are required, but I highly recommend that you really implement all of them, and Microsoft also itself. So if you choose not to implement certain services, it will affect the functionality that Teams can offer to your organization. For example, though you don't have to implement SharePoint Online, but Teams does rely on SharePoint Online for certain functionalities such as file sharing in group conversation. And so not implementing this service will reduce the functionality offered through the client itself. You need to ask you specifically the following questions. If your organization hasn't deployed any Microsoft 365 or Office 365 workloads, or hasn't added or configured a verified domain for Microsoft 365 or Office 365, that you need to go ahead for that. And all the stuff I had discussed in the walkthrough to go ahead to plan the hybrid configuration is still the same. So you have the Azure Active Directory Connect that needs to be established. What's happened if you don't have Exchange Online in place? What if you haven't implemented SharePoint Online? Because these are all the related technologies behind Microsoft Teams. And additionally, there is the Student Information System, the SDS. That's the Microsoft Do School Data Sync. Maybe if you have a school environment, this is a regular question you need to ask yourself: how and I work with that. On the other hand, we have the public switch telephone network, the PSTN calling, and also see here the different options that you really can go ahead and plan the right things for your upgrade journey. Furthermore, obviously, you need to prepare your services for upgrading to Teams. So you can work through the checklist that Microsoft provides to work through for your organization. The tasks and the activities in this checklist are the core to-do items, which you will find on the webpage on docs.microsoft.com, and that apply to every deployment of collaboration and voice capabilities with Teams. Obviously, you can customize the checklist to include the activities and tasks that are specific to your Teams journey. Use the provided checklist to really track the status of each individual activity and task, and to be sure you haven't skipped any critical steps in your journey. So each activity includes a detailed description of required actions and references to additional information that you can use really to complete your whole activity in your service preparation. Also, I recommend that you follow the checklist in order that the exact sequence will depend on the scope of your deployment and the configuration and complexity of your environment. So they are specifically organized to support either a greenfield Teams deployment, so one with no previous Skype for Business Online presence, or upgrading from Skype for Business Online to Teams. When you are onboarding users on a per site basis, I highly recommend that you use the Site Enablement Playbook for Voice. That's a supplementary guide to this specific checklist, what you see here on this slide deck. Another important task in your migration scenario is that you prepare really your users for the Teams. So to realize the maximum value from Teams, users really must actually use it. But getting users to change the way they work isn't always an easy task. And taking time to understand your users and design the right readiness plan can help you to facilitate change and accelerate adoption of Teams itself. You could or you should complete these activities at the same time as your technical readiness preparation. So First of all, the assessing organizational change readiness, which includes the understanding who your users are, how they'll use the new technology, and basically how readily they adopt to change. This is also an opportunity to identify specific user profiles who would benefit from focused onboarding, for example. On the other hand, the task is to prepare a user readiness plan, which is consisting of awareness, training, support activities, and your readiness plan should address both your broad user base and target profiles as you identified in the assessing the change readiness. Specifically, the assess of the organization change readiness is simply enabling teams doesn't guarantee that you archive your goal. So users have different use cases and varying learning styles, and they adopt new technology in different speeds. So managing the change isn't all that complicated, but it does take a focused effort. So we need to really understand our user base so that you really can prepare the right level of education to facilitate and accelerate user adoption itself. And specifically, understanding how users work and how they come together can really help you users visualize how they can use Teams and facilitating the shift away from Skype for Business. So there are two core ways you can think about it, a people-centric and a project-centric approach. The project-centric teamwork centers on the specific project or initiative. For example, you plan a product launch event. From scope planning to budget management to marketing efforts, or the project-centric teamwork helps align project work streams, keeping everyone informed. The people-centric teamwork revolves around people with similar responsibilities for attributes who might work on the same team. For example, the sales team or the road warriors, for example, or across teams, for example, peer champions and other peers you want to use. From chatting with a colleague to get an answer to a question to participating in a team meeting, people-centric activities include information sharing and rapport building, for example. Deploying new technologies can really affect your users' productivity and your network, just like you'd paint a small patch of color on a wall before painting the whole room. So you should test really a broad rollout on a smaller scale. So to conduct a pilot to validate technical and user readiness, to identify and mitigate issues, and help to ensure a successful organization-wide implementation. To achieve the most realistic results, a Teams pilot should involve actual users, mimic how they communicate and collaborate, and verify both technical and user experiences. Whether your organization is considering running Skype for Business and Teams side by side, upgrading to Teams in the future, or deploying new functionality such as calling or conferencing, pilot can really help you to identify the right path forward for your organization. So as you have seen here, this pilot graphical overview, what we see there on the slide, is it should give you a small planning tool to work through with your user pilot. So 1 week before the pilot, for example, you can have a kickoff to send initial communication to the pilot users. On day 1, send kickoff communication to pilot users. Day 7, for example, hold the first weekly project team checkpoint meeting. Day 14, send a midpoint communication to your pilot users. Hold a weekly project team checkpoint meeting. And you see the further things with day 21, day 30, and around 31 and 45, assess the pilot results and plan for the next steps. So you see here in the 45 days approach, you get really a lot of things working and doing out of that. So this should really give you an idea how you can work further with all the different aspects in your working through. As you see here, we find the coexistence mode that I explained earlier in this module, the island mode, the Skype for Business only mode, the Teams only mode, and the Skype for Business with Teams collab mode, and Skype for Business with Teams collaboration and meetings, also known as the meetings first mode. Additionally, when you are upgrading from Skype for Business to Microsoft Teams, either online or on premises, there are the following two approaches: the direct upgrade journey and the gradual upgrade journey. So just that you have heard about these scenarios. In direct upgrade journey, you first deploy Teams alongside Skype for Business in island mode as part of evaluation and early adoption, and then you can upgrade users to the team only mode. The goal is to quickly retire Skype for Business from the environment for all users in your organization. So it's a recommended journey for Skype for Business online customers. So unless organizations have concerns on user adoption, for example. In the direct upgrade journey, Teams are deployed to all users in the organization and configured in island mode. And after educating the users about Teams functionalities and scenarios, the organization will basically decide that Teams can replace Skype for Business. From that moment, you can start upgrading the users to Teams only mode. And at that point, Skype for Business can be retired from the environment, and you can set, or you can see the direct upgrade journey specifically as a successful method as an option. On the other hand, we have the gradual upgrade journey. In this journey, it offers you a coexisting and individual upgrade modes for different groups of users, also called cohorts, based on the different requirements. In this path, Teams is deployed in the organization in island mode for evaluation and then moved to different coexistence modes for different groups of users. For example, group of users are enabled for island mode, while another group of users are enabled for Skype for Business with Teams collaboration and meetings mode. And maybe the third group of users are enabled for Skype for Business with Teams collaboration only mode. Over time, the organization will be ready to retire Skype for Business and use Teams for communications and collaborations. So this is basic topic what you can do at that point. There's also an AKMS/Skype to Teams minus coexist. There's a really great article exactly about these scenarios. Another important topic we need to talk about is how the available functionality in Teams client changes based on the specific mode. So as said in your Teams upgrade policy, you can do that. So the user's effective mode, for example, any Skype for Business mode, and the calling, chat and self-presence are disabled in the Teams client. In the Skype for Business with Teams collab and meetings, the meeting scheduling is available, and in Skype for Business Teams collab or S4B only, the meeting scheduling is not available. So you have really different approaches and different topics that really changes. From a technical perspective, a user mode governs basically several aspects of the user experience. For example, the incoming routing, which governs in which clients, Teams or Skype for Business incoming chats and calls land. The presence publishing, which governs whether the user presence that is shown to other users based on their activity is shown. The meeting scheduling, for example, as I remember correctly, this governs which service is used for scheduling new meetings and ensuring that the proper add-in is presented in Outlook. But really take a note, users can always join any meeting, whether it by a Skype for Business meeting or a Teams meeting. On the other hand, we have the client experience, which governs specifically the functionality that's available in Teams and or Skype for Business to initiate calls and chats in Teams, or Skype for Business, or both. This also governs whether the Teams and channel experience is available. In the following slide, I provide you a summary about these technical perspectives in the user modes. So you see here really what's happening with the user experience and how it's been covered inside of the different scenarios. Then you see on the gray buttons the incoming routing, presence publishing, meeting scheduling, and the client experience, and how it's being covered or governed in the specific functionality of your client. That's a good way, if you see the recording afterwards, that you can really recap all the different perspectives of the specific user modes itself. The next topic what we need to discuss is the interoperability escalation from Skype for Business. Basically, the interoperability and the escalation specific from Skype for Business were updated in July 2019, built of a monthly C2R. So previously Skype for Business did not have advanced awareness that the remote party was using Teams. It only surmised that from the signaling received after a session was established. So when signaling indicated that the response came from or through the interoperability gateway, it would display the yellow business bar banner that's indicating that the other party was not using Skype for Business. With the evolution of the Microsoft service, this resulted in false positives where Skype for Business users would, for example, see the business bar when they were connected to the cloud voice mail service or other cloud voice services rather than to an actual Teams only user. To prevent these false positives, the present service is now informing the Skype for Business client when the other party is Teams only, and that you really have a great indicator about that. This allows Skype for Business to be aware that it needs to create an interop conversation ahead of it having been created, and then the conversation window is specific to the interop functionality itself. There is also the interoperability escalation from Teams itself. So this capability is supported in the Teams desktop client for Windows, in the Teams desktop client for Mac, and in the Teams web client on browsers where content sharing is supported, while in the communication with and Skype for Business client version. In the interoperability threads and in federation interop threads, the Teams user now has controls button to start the content sharing. When the Teams user selects this button, they are presented with an additional menu that informs them that to share the content they will need to start a Teams meeting. And if the users were in a call, the menu also warns them that their current call between Teams and Skype for Business will be terminated as they are put into a Teams meeting. If they so choose, they can warn the Skype for Business user prior to accepting, for example. Upon this acceptance, they are put in the Teams meeting. They must start sharing from the sharing tray in the meeting, for example. Meanwhile, the Skype for Business user receives an incoming chat message with the link to the meeting and is precisely guided to join the session. The escalation to a Teams meeting is available for both in-tenant interoperability and cross-tenant federated calls and chats. So it is by default, and there is no setting the administrator have really to provision about that, so you don't need to do something in that case. However, it is turned off for the user if the administrator sets, for example, the allow private meet now in the CS Teams meeting policy to false. Basically, Teams provides all the relevant instances of the Teams upgrade policy via the built-in read-only policies. Therefore, only get and grant CMDLets are available. These policy instances can be granted either to individual users or on a tenant-wide basis. Let's do a short example about it. To upgrade a user, a $zip address to Teams, grant the upgrade to Teams instance. You can do that with the grant -CS Teams upgrade policy CMDLet with the option -policy name upgrade to Teams -identity $the zip address. Or to upgrade the entire tenant omit the identity parameter from the grant command. So you can just use grant -cs teams upgrade policy -policy name upgrade to teams. Another important topic is the federation considerations. Federation from Teams to another user using Skype for Business requires basically the Teams user be homed online in Skype for Business. Eventually, Teams users homed in Skype for Business on premises will be also able to federate with Teams only users. The Teams upgrade policy governs routing for incoming federated chats and calls in specific, and the federated routing behavior is the same as for same tenant scenarios, like except the island mode. When the recipients are in the island mode, we have a specific scenario we need to really take care about. The chats and calls initiated from Teams land in Skype for Business if the recipient is in a federated tenant. Chats and calls initiated from Teams land in Teams if the recipient is in the same tenant. Chats and calls initiated from Skype for Business always lands in Skype for Business. So basically the Teams client experiences when using Skype for Business modes. When a user is in any of the Skype for Business modes, S4B only, Skype for Business with Teams call-up, Skype for Business with Teams call-up in meetings, all incoming chats and calls are routed to the user Skype for Business client. That's very important that you really remember exactly these topics. Another aspect is to implement quality of service in Microsoft Teams. Quality of service is basically a mechanism you use to prioritize certain types of network traffic. QoS is a way to allow real-time network traffic like voice or video streams that is sensitive to network delays. To cut in line ahead of traffic that is less sensitive, like downloading a new app where an extra second to download is negligible. So QoS identifies and marks all packets in real-time streams using Windows group policy objects and a routing feature called port-based access control lists. Specifically, if we talk about this, it helps us for our network to grant voice, video and screen share streams as a dedicated portion of network bandwidth. There are some typical issues in voice and video communication without the implementation of QoS. So like jitter that describes the occurrence where media arrives at different rates, which results in missing words or syllables in calls, for example. On the other hand, we have the packet loss that describes the occurrence where packets in a data transfer are dropped and missing. This will cause lower voice quality and speech that is difficult to understand. Another one is the delayed round trip time, RTT, that describes media packets requiring a longer time to reach their destinations, for example. Users will experience noticeable delays between two parties in a conversation, causing people to speak at the same time. One way to solve these network quality issues is to increase the overall availability of bandwidth for data connections, both the internal and to the internet. However, quality issues are also caused by a low bandwidth for certain real-time applications and other services that consume the majority of available bandwidth, such as mass file transfers. To solve these quality issues, you can manage the bandwidth with quality of service technologies. In most cases, the implementation of QoS is considered either during the planning and the assessment phase or during the deployment of Microsoft Teams in specific voice communication. With the implementation of QoS, when issues occur for end users, you can evaluate QoS for troubleshooting purpose. You should work with the network team and consider using Teams reporting capabilities such, for example, the call analytics and the call quality dashboard to identify the issues and adjust the settings of QoS. To provide QoS, obviously network devices must have a way to classify traffic and be able to distinguish voice or video from other network traffic. In the moment when the network traffic passes through a router, it is placed into a queue. So if a QoS policy is not configured, there will be just one queue and all traffic will be treated as first in, first out with the same priority. So when you implement QoS, you define multiple queues using one of several congestion management features and congestion avoidance features, for example. A simple analogy is that QoS creates virtual carpool lanes, for example, in your data network, so some types of data never or rarely encounter a delay. Once you create those lanes, you can adjust their relative size and much more effectively manage the connection bandwidth you have while still delivering business-grade experience for your organization users. So basically, as a high-level overview, what you need to do is to verify if your network is ready for QoS, select the desired QoS implementation method, choose the initial port ranges for each media type and the implementation of the QoS settings on clients, routers and in the Teams admin center, and obviously validate the QoS implementation by analyzing Teams traffic on the network itself. In the following figure you show exactly these different lanes, for example for audio, video and all the other traffic. So the audio with a voice priority queue, the video with a BW queue plus dhcp read, and the web email transfer and file transfer, the best effort queue, to really split the total available bandwidth. Additionally, you need to think about obviously VPN considerations. So QoS only works as expected when implementing on all the links between the callers. So if you use QoS on an internal network and a user signs in from a remote location, you can only prioritize within your internal managed network. Although remote locations can receive a managed connection by implementing a virtual private network VPN, and a VPN inherently adds packet overhead and creates delays in real-time traffic. It's basically recommended that you avoid running real-time communications traffic over a VPN. To select a specific QoS implementation method, there are basically different methods to implement that. The first way is to use access control lists. You could, for example, implement QoS via port-based tagging using access control lists on your network routers. Port-based tagging basically is the most reliable method because it works universally throughout all platforms such as mixed Windows and Mac environments and is the easiest method to implement. Your network routers examines an incoming packet. If the packet arrived using a certain port or range of ports, it identifies it is a certain media type and puts in the queue for that type. Adding a predetermined differentiated service code point dhcp marker to the IP packet header so other devices can recognize its traffic type and prioritize in their queue. On the other hand, we have the group policy objects which we can work with to directly address the client devices to insert a DHCP marker in the IP packet headers, identifying specifically a particular type of traffic such as voice, for example. Routers and other network devices can basically be configured to recognize this and put the traffic in a separate higher priority queue. This scenario works only for domain joined Windows clients, so in the event the device isn't a domain joined Windows client, it will not be enabled for DHCP tagging. Clients like macOS have hard-coded tags and will always tag traffic. In this case, controlling the DHCP marking via GPO ensures that all domain joined computers receive the same settings and that they can be managed only by the designated administrator, and the client that can use the GPO will be tagged on the originating device. Another option obviously is to combine these two methods, so you use access control lists and the group policy objects combined. And it's also the recommended part to use the combination of DHCP markings at the endpoints and the port-based ASLs on routers if possible. So if using the group policy object to catch the majority of clients and also using port-based DHCP tagging will ensure that, for example, mobile, Mac and other clients will still get QoS treatments. The most important configuration step in Teams is the classification and marking of packets. So for end-to-end QoS to be successful, you need to be carefully align the application's configuration with the underlying network configuration itself. In case of these network operations, we really need to choose the initial port ranges for each media type. Just a short side note, if you want to attend to the Microsoft exam for the MS700, you really need to know and remember these client ports. For audio, 15,000 to 15,019, and video 50,020 to 50,039, and the application screen sharing is 50,040 and 50,059. A TCP UDP protocol. So, and specifically what we need to take care about is the dhcp value that tells the corresponding configured network what priority to give a packet or stream, whether the dhcp marking is assigned by client or the network itself, based for example on ACL settings. Each media workload gets its own unique dhcp value, so other services might allow workloads to share a dhcp marking, but Teams in that case does not do that. So, and the defined and separate port range used for each media type. The table shows you the required DHCP markings and the suggested corresponding media port ranges used by both Teams and, for example, the Express route. Just a short side note, the port ranges you assign really cannot overlap and must be really correct assigned to each other. You can basically implement the QoS in the Teams Admin Center, where you can activate and deactivate QoS in the Teams Admin Center for a tenant and configure the port range for each type of real-time media traffic. So while the port ranges can be adjusted, the DHCP markings cannot be changed. So you can implement your required settings in the Teams Admin Center on meeting settings in the network area. If you basically select automatically use any available ports, the available ports are between 1024 and 65,535 that are being used in such a scenario. So use this option only when you're not implementing QoS. Selecting a port range that is too narrow will lead to dropped calls and poor call quality. So the default value should be used at the minimum. Just a short side note on that, turning on insert quality of service markers for real-time media traffic will also enable the communication to the transport relay with UDP ports 3479 for audio and 3480 for video and 3481 for sharing. In the next demonstration I will show you how you can configure Microsoft Teams to upgrade for all the users.
So what we can do at the first thing is that we import the specific module. That's the Skype for Business connector, what we need to work to interface with the migration of Skype for Business users to Microsoft Teams. Obviously you can do all the stuff in the Teams Admin Center, but I think it's a very powerful option if you do that as well over the PowerShell itself, that you can automate the process, or that you can also make some log files or anything like you want during the whole migration process from Skype for Business to Teams. Basically what we can use to see which state which user is the get CS online, specifically the user, and what we can do is we can just select it for the user principal name, and we see the Teams upgrade. With this commandlet we can see directly how the user in which state he is. As you see, I had done a lot of migrations as well here in this tenant, so basically I have a lot of Teams only Teams upgrade effective modes here that are already done in this tenant, so already migrated to the Teams only scenario. How I can do an upgrade for all the users to Teams only, for example. You can basically do that by the command let says grant, sorry about the typo, grant minus cs Teams upgrade policy minus policy name. Then you go through Teams only, and you can say this is a global, specifically a global value. This brings you a Teams upgrade for all the users in your environment to the Teams only state. That's a great idea to work really with that topic, to go ahead and to start over if you have really already done all your presets and everything, that you can go ahead through this process.
Now that we have seen the demonstration to upgrade all users, we will do it for a single user in the next demonstration.
How you can migrate a single user to Microsoft Teams. And obviously there we have a lot of different options what we can use. For example, we can say grant CS Teams upgrade policy. Just go back. Upgrade policy minus policy name, and we can, for example, go to an island mode with a notification for the user. So we say, for example, islands with notify. That's one option that you can go with to say, for example, I want to provide it for a specific user. Let's say here in my user account, in this case. So that's one basic way to upgrade one user to an island mode with a notification. Obviously, what you also can do is you can do it for different other methods, coexistence modes. So you just need to replace the policy name here that you provide, for example, a Skype for business and only with notify. In this case, that also helps you to bring all the stuff together to really upgrade one selective user to a specific mode. Obviously, you can use it in a different manner, so you can also put the policy name at the end and before the identity. That's up to you how you want to work and how your notification is inside of that. Obviously, as I also mentioned before, you can always check your state of the specific user. You just need to go to the CS Online user back, and then you can select the specific user principal name here, not a specific, you just filter for that, and you can just go to the Teams upgrade state to see in which state you are with your user. That's pretty an easy and moving forward process to really upgrade a single user to another coexistence mode or to Teams only itself.
On this next demonstration, I will show you how you can upgrade from Skype for Business Online to Teams.
The next important topic is how you can go to move a user to Teams or to Skype for Business only. For that you need to use the move CS user topic, and then you can say the identity, for example, in my example here, Nickel, liano.ch, and then you can say the target. You go to zipfat online link.com, and obviously you put the credentials in what you need to the move to do the move. That specifically needs obviously a parameter that's called move to Teams. Another option what you can use in that case, if you don't tell it to the CMD lad that you want to move to Teams, you just remove this specific switch and then you move a user to Skype for Business only. That's a quite easy and forward process, I think, to can work with, and then you can work with the Teams upgrade policies if you are just starting to move to Skype for Business, and then you can upgrade to the Teams only mode. In this practical part, it's a quite easy process. I think it's a better option really to work here over the PowerShell than over the GUI, because you have more automatical topics in that. Obviously in the Teams Admin Center you can also make bulk operations. You can do 20 at one time, and with the PowerShell you don't have any limits in exactly these processes. The advisor for Teams and to roll out Microsoft Teams is a great way to go for. The advisor specifically for Teams walks you through your Microsoft Teams rollout. It assesses your Microsoft 365 organization environment, and you can identify really the most common configurations that you may need to update or modify before you can successfully roll out of Teams. The advisor for Teams also creates a deployment team in Teams specific, with channels for each workload you want to roll out, for example. Each workload in the deployment team comes with a comprehensive planner plan that includes all the rollout tasks for each workload. So you have a really great experience in that to go forward in your project. You can modify that obviously on your own needs. So using this planner plan, you are assigned tasks to the people that are responsible for each phase of the rollout, including, for example, the project manager, the team service admins, the support people, and your adoption and user readiness team, for example. Each rollout task contains all the guidance and resources you need really to successfully complete the task. So the advisor for Teams is part of the Teams Admin Center, and at the minimum you really need to have a Microsoft 365 Business Basic license, so you can really take the advantage of the advisor for Teams integration with the forms and planner options that are inside of that part. That's really a great option. Just one note, if you have a government environment, the advisor for Teams isn't available for Microsoft 365 government, GCC High or DoD deployments in that case. We need to have a Teams forms and planner license that are required to use the advisor for Teams. So, but however, you don't have to be a Teams admin to use advisor for Teams. So anybody in your organization can use it. So Microsoft have also set up special permissions so non-admin users can get to advisor for Teams, even though it's in the Teams Admin Center. Basically you do have to be a Teams admin, a Teams service administrator, or a global administrator, obviously, to open the tenant readiness assessments. This is because we, or better saying, we don't have a special known admin role that don't have the access to the Microsoft Grave API, which is basically underlying to this assessment. Just important, if the team advisor is missing under planning in the Teams Admin Center, is that written here, it means that the user isn't licensed for Teams. Also, the first time you use advisor for Teams, it will basically create a deployment team for you in Teams, and it adds the channel for each workload you selected on this part. Also, an important note, if a deployment team has already been created and a different user tries to create it, they'll get a specific error that tells them to contact their support team. So this prevents basically teams for unintentionally disclosing information about the existing team and its members. So you can just ask the owner of the deployment team to add you or to contact the specific support person for your help. The available advisor for Teams plans. So we have the chat, Teams, channels and apps. We have the meetings and conferencing, and the Skype for Business upgrade. We have always a tenant assessment inside of that. Then we have the planner plan to include all the different tasks that we need to go through, and a form for the users away. Another big option here inside is the advisor for the Teams bot itself. For Skype for Business users, on-prem or online, there is really a great upgrade plan that will take you through the whole journey of that. So that's a really proven success framework for implementing the changes, the plan, with the step-by-step process to go through the Microsoft Teams implementation itself. For all the different scenarios, we have this tenant assessment. So each plan includes a tenant readiness assessment that you can use to quickly identify aspects of your environments that may need remediation before you roll out Teams. So the assessment includes the different prerequisites and best practices. So you have different check marks, green check marks or orange warning triangles. The warning triangle, I think it's something, a recommendation for an action, like Microsoft 365 group expiration policy is recommended, but not required. It's very important that once a user with an administrative role starts Advisor for Teams, all the assessments run in the background. So if you update or remediate something, it may not be reflected in your assessment for up to 24 hours.
In the next section we will take a closer look on the planning and configuration of the network settings for Microsoft Teams itself. Prior to the deployment of Microsoft Teams in a productive environment, you need to evaluate if the existing network meets the network requirements of Microsoft Teams. Make sure that you have the required bandwidth, access to all the required IP addresses, the correct ports opened, and that you are meeting the performance requirements specifically for real-time media. Microsoft Teams basically utilizes three types of network traffic direction: the data traffic between the Office 365 online environment and the Teams client, which is signaling, presence, chat, file upload, download, and the OneNote synchronization. On the other hand, we have the peer-to-peer real-time communications traffic, like audio, video, desktop sharing. The third point is the conferencing real-time communications traffic between all the stuff about audio, video, and desktop sharing. Basically, this impacts the network data flow in two levels. The traffic flows between the Teams client directly in a peer-to-peer situation, and the second one is between the Office 365 environment and the Teams clients for meetings. Therefore, really to ensure optimal traffic flow, traffic must be allowed to flow between the internal network segments, such as between sites over the wide area network WAN, as well as between the network sites and Office 365. Not opening the correct ports or actively blocking specific ports will lead to a degraded experience in your whole story. Microsoft Teams gives you the best audio, video and content sharing experience regardless of your network conditions. With variable codecs, media can be negotiated in limited bandwidth environments with minimal impact. But where bandwidth is not a concern, experiences can be optimized for quality, including up to 1080p video resolution, up to 30 frames per second, or video in 50 frames per second for content, as well as a high fidelity audio. Teams is always conservative on bandwidth utilization and can deliver HD video quality in under 1.2 megabits per second. So actually bandwidth consumption in each audio video call or meeting will vary based on the several factors such as video layout, video resolution, and the video frames per second settings. When more bandwidth is available, quality and the usage will increase really to deliver the best experience. But you should really be aware about also additional network capabilities like the connectivity to Office 365. Firewalls, proxies are always blockers in such a scenario. The quality of the network connectivity itself, the available bandwidth as we have discussed here in this case, then the clients that are connected over a Wi-Fi network, because Wi-Fi solutions are also vulnerable for high latency and possible higher packet loss if not prepared for real-time services such as voice and video communication. So additionally, the network coverage must provide enough bandwidth even between access points and on the edges itself. Another point is if you have intrusion detection, IDS, and prevention system, IPS systems in the game. So if any environment uses IDS and IPS solutions, really make sure all the traffic between your environment and Office 365 is whitelisted and specifically excluded from scanning. Another point is the NAT pool size. So when multiple user devices access, for example, Office 365 using a network address translation or port address translation, you really need to ensure that the devices hidden behind each publicly routable ID address do not exceed really the supported number. Also, the network health determination is a very important topic. So if you are planning to implement Microsoft Teams within your network, you really must ensure having sufficient bandwidth, as we already discussed, accessibility to all the IP addresses, configuration of ports, meeting the performance requirements, all for the real-time data. So about the VPNs, we already had a discussion. Another point is the proxy servers. Really, it's recommended that the proxy servers are bypassed because performance-related problems can be specifically introduced into environments through latency and packet loss. So issues such as these will result in a negative experience in Teams or Skype for Business audio and video scenarios, so where the real-time streams are essential. And it's also recommended that the organization uses an external DNS resolution, direct UP-based routing, and to allow the UDP traffic itself. When you evaluate the existing network environment, hard limitations such as blocked IP addresses, faulty name resolution through DNS, and blocked ports are fast to spot because certain Teams features will simply not work at all when IP addresses or ports are closed. Discovering bandwidth latency or packet loss issues is more complicated, so because they may appear only under special circumstances. For example, if a high number of users are using voice communication at the same time. Therefore, when planning the network requirements for Teams deployment, you really must calculate the maximum number of concurrent users, including a reasonable buffer, for example. A good tool really to plan exactly these topics is the Network Planner. The Network Planner is a tool in the Teams Admin Center which is designated or designed specifically to assist you as an administrator to determine and organize the network requirements for connecting Microsoft Teams users across the whole organization. You can access the tool by going to the Microsoft Teams Admin Center. Under Planning, you will find the Network Planner, as you can see here in the figure of the slides. So after providing all the network details and the Teams usage, the Network Planner calculates the network requirements for deploying Teams and Cloud Voice across the organization's physical locations. You can specifically use the Network Planner to create representations of your organization using the sites and Microsoft recommended personas, for example, the office workers, remote workers, and the Teams room devices. You can generate reports and calculate bandwidth requirements for Teams usage. And in order, obviously, to use the Network Planner, you must have a specific role assigned in your Azure Active Directory. So you need to be the global administrator, the Teams admin, or the Teams communication administrator. In the next demonstration, I will show you how we can work with the Network Planner.
With the Network Planner, we get a great tool really to plan our Microsoft Teams integration in our environment. The first thing what Microsoft provides is a view of personas that have specific configurations that we can really test against our network requirements, that we know how we can work with, we can calculate all the stuff. So Microsoft already provides in this tenant what I have, Teams room system, the remote worker, and the office worker. I can also add my additional personas in that case. For example, let's say this is the mobile workforce, and I can define, okay, I need to have the permissions for audio, video, screen sharing, conference audio, and conference video, and I can work exactly on this persona. So this helps me really to bring up a specific persona. You can also use one that says I want a persona that is calling only or anything like that. Another part what you can do is that you can say, okay, I want to add, for example, a network plan. Let's say we want to have one New York Teams network plan. So, okay, we apply this short, and if we can go inside, we, for example, add an additional network site. So let's say, okay, we have a network site here, a specific subnet, let's say 10.00, and add one additional more 2.0 subnet, and we have, for example, network users, let's say 1020 here in that case, and obviously the range cannot be empty. I need to have here a number. Let's say we have 24, also 24, and we can also say how this is connected, for example, over the WAN, and we can provide all the capacity information of this specific topic, so that we see the WAN link capacities, the WAN audio queue size, the WAN video size, how is the internet link capacity, and what's the usage here in that case. So for example, for voice over IP only, or for local communication here in that part. So with this topic you can really address all the different things about the network sites, and if you go later on to create a report on this topic, you can collect all the information from the call analytics and all the other information what you gathered inside of your tests, and then you can see which site, for example, have improvement or needs improvements, or which is okay for you in the moment. So that's a great opportunity to really work with this tool set to address different issues in your network environment. On the other hand, what you can use on a client itself is that you, for example, use the network testing companion as an additional part. You can install that by install module network testing companion. Let's do that short. Okay, we accept that. It's a quite easy process. We are just downloading this tool. The next step what we need to do is to invoke, for example, the tool create shortcuts. This allows me to directly provide a shortcut here for the companion itself. Then you can start it by double clicking, or you can also say, for example, I invoke the network testing client. After starting the UI for the testing client, you can really just start to go ahead with the tests. So you see directly what is about your Windows operating system, how is your internet connection, is there any ports missing or anything, and we can also start the Microsoft Teams or Skype certified device test. Obviously I'm here on a virtual machine, I don't have anything connected to that, and on the other hand we can also use the network assessment tool. So I can just install the topic, so it installs all the necessary tools in the background for the test, and I can start the different test modes and see the results later on here about the network quality, about the network connectivity. It provides me really great reports at the end and to see really what's the biggest problem in my environment or not. I also can use the settings that say how many consecutive audio tests I want to do, the delay between the audio tests, and the connectivity test timeout that you can specify here in this specific part. So you just start the tool and it's running the whole connectivity tests. It will ask you for your firewall configuration or local firewall configuration, and it will run all the necessary tests for you. So this is a great option additionally to the network planner, that you really go to the specific sites on several clients and test the connectivity on the client itself to really gather more and more information about your network environment. This will help you really to get a clear picture about all your network information, about any delays, what you expect, or is it just fine for you to really run Microsoft Teams in the different networking sites. Just play around with that tool. I think this gives you the insights you need, and you can start in your deployment of your Microsoft Teams environment and to have a successful implementation from you.
Another great tool is the Microsoft Skype for Business Network Assessment tool. After you have completed your planning and network preparation, including the upgrading bandwidth and opening ports in the firewall, you really should test your network's performance. So the results of this testing will give you a clearer picture of any network optimization or remediation required for the success of your Teams implementation. You can download the Skype for Business Network Assessment tool via the Learn More link, that you can work with that specifically. So you can use the tool to test whether your network is ready for Teams, and the tool offers you dual functionality. It can test whether all the correct ports have been opened, and it can test for network impairments, for example. After you download and install the tool, you can find it specifically under C program files, Microsoft Skype for Business Network Assessment tool, and you will also receive a detailed guide how to use specifically the tool that you can work with. Another cool tool is the Network Test Companion. That's a similar tool where you can also use it to test Skype for Business and Microsoft Teams integration. These tools can simulate user sessions and traffic for testing the available network quality and connection settings for using, for example, Skype for Business Online and Microsoft Teams. This test basically includes several areas, such as the overall connectivity to Office 365 and the required ports, if certified devices are connected to the client, and if the network quality in specific meets the official minimum requirements for the real-time voice communication. The Network Testing Companion provides also results for exporting and sharing it with you or your specific network administrator or partners that help you to implement, in order to create a documented, detailed overview about the existing network environment. You can install specifically the Network Testing Companion over the install module Network Testing Companion, and you can invoke with tool create shortcuts that you can start to work with the tool itself. It's a quite easy and fast moving forward approach. Here we see also the additional network requirements that I already mentioned before about audio, voice, and all the different topics with the UDP ports 3478 through 3481 and the specific IP addresses that do address the Microsoft network itself. So these are really the ports that must be opened for all locations for media and Teams. So that's a real important topic you need to gather and to keep care about. Okay, let's summarize the different network optimizations, what we could do. You see an overview or insight of this slide specifically. So you might also to have additional network optimizations, like if Teams running slow, maybe you have insufficient bandwidth or calls keep dropping, might be for example due to firewall or proxy blockers, or calls have static and cut out, or voices sound like robots, this could really be a jitter or a packet loss. So to use specifically the network planner is a best effort really to go and to see all the different things that calculates Microsoft for you to help you really to organize your network. The next point is the advisor for Teams. That is a specific assessment of your Microsoft 365 or Office 365 environment, and it identifies the most common configuration that you may need to update or to modify before you can successfully roll out your Teams implementation. The next point is the external name resolution. So be really sure that all the computers running the Teams client can resolve external DNS queries to discover specifically the services provided by Microsoft 365 or Office 365, and your firewalls are not preventing any access to them. There's a specific firewall ports list on the web. Just search about Microsoft 365 and Office 365 URLs and IP address ranges, and you will find the needed address ranges to address exactly this part. You also need to maintain the session persistence, so make really sure firewall doesn't change the mapped network address translation addresses or ports for UDP. That's an important stuff. You also see this sometimes with some zip helpers or some different helpers that have a misleading functionality at that. Also validate the NAT pool size, so you really need to do that to required configuration when, for example, multiple users and devices access Microsoft 365 or Office 365 using the two technologies NAT and PAT. You really need to ensure that the devices hidden behind each publicly routable IP address do not exceed the supported number. That's an important topic. Also, routing to the Microsoft data centers, it's also a typical scenario that you need to keep care about intrusion detection and prevention. There's a specific guide also available on the Microsoft website itself. Another part we just talked about it is the VPN topic. So Microsoft and I recommend that you really provide an alternative path for Teams traffic that bypasses the virtual private network. That's commonly known as a split tunnel VPN. There's a specific article on docs.microsoft.com which you will find. It's called Identity Protection VPN routing. Split tunneling basically means that the traffic for Microsoft 365 or Office 365 doesn't go through the VPN, but instead goes directly to Microsoft 365 or Office 365. So bypassing your VPN will have a positive impact on the Teams quality, and it reduces load from the VPN devices and the organization network. Also think about the security of your devices. Mainly Windows Defender ADP or other technologies can really help you if you don't want to go over traffic that you want to use a proxy that's commonly internally used. About the implementation QoS, I think we have discussed this specifically topic, and the optimization about Wi-Fi. So implement QoS or Wi-Fi multimedia really to ensure that the media traffic is getting prioritized appropriately over your Wi-Fi networks, and obviously plan and optimize the Wi-Fi bands and access point placements. So also the 2.4 gigahertz and the 5 gigahertz ranges, where the range of 5 gigahertz is obviously better suited to real-time media due all those typical features of the 5 gigahertz ranges. So really take care about exactly these scenarios, and you will have a successful scenario and a deployment of Microsoft Teams. The following table summarizes the bandwidth requirements for up and download and the typical scenarios that are used for. There we see on the left side the 30 kilobytes per second where the peer-to-peer audio calling, the same for peer-to-peer audio calling and screen sharing, the 500 kilobytes per second per peer-to-peer quality video quality, 360p and 30 frames per second, and you see how it increases if you use an HD format or an HD 1080p at 30 frames per second, where you just go up to 1.5 megabits per second. For group video calling, it's about 500 kilobits per second to 1 megabits per second. And if you have an HD group video calling with a 540p videos on a 1080p screen, it's about 10 megabits per second or 2 megabits per second. So really also Microsoft Teams is optimized really to work on the worst scenarios, but really keep care, as I already mentioned inside of this module, keep care about the bandwidth. For Teams to function correctly, you really must be opened the ports TCP 80 and 443 from the clients to the internet, and the specific UDP ports for audio video screen sharing from 3478 through 3481 from the clients to the internet. The TCP ports in that specific case are used to connect to the web-based content such as SharePoint Online, Exchange Online, and the Teams chat services. Plugins and connectors are also connected over these TCP ports, but the 4 UDP ports are specifically used for media such as audio, video to ensure they flow correctly. So really keep care about that. Use the Skype for Business network assessment or the network tool for Teams to avoid really closed ports or misleading information, DNS resolution and anything like that over proxy servers itself. Also now we summarized the additional network considerations like the external name resolution, what we have discussed about, the NAT pool size, and the intrusion detection and prevention guidance, which I mentioned in the previous slides as well. So really take care about exactly these network considerations. So this just gives you a small overview exactly about this. So just to complete the plan for preparing your network to upgrade your teams successfully, test the network with the network assessment tool as I mentioned. Do some pilot user groups specifically on wireless LAN topics. On VPN, give it really a try on that. See is a split tunneling configured and or not, because a lot of companies I see in my practice that they really want to force the tunnel because they mean that they lose security if they don't force the tunnel. Obviously there's it's a very important aspect because normally maybe the users go through the proxy or blocked sites or anything like that. So really you need to think about an alternative configuration on your client side, but Microsoft provides you as much as possible all the different functionalities really to provide a good security and a complete security for your clients as well in such a scenario. On the other hand, really look that really the traffic can flow in an unhindered way. Look that you really test your firewall rules, retest the ports, and really for network impairments always perform a root cause analysis that you really know exactly from which feature set it comes, that you can improve your network quality in that case. As we already know, Microsoft Teams is an application which offers the users to stay connected no matter which type of device or operating system they work. Users can work with Teams on desktop clients available in Windows and Mac, Linux, and as well as web clients and mobile clients in Android and iOS. So there are also a lot of different Teams devices such as conferences, phones, headsets, speakerphones, cameras, and conference rooms. Employees specifically use Teams from their device in order to attend the meetings, deliver files, and join the conversation from anywhere, while you as an admin create secure and well-managed collaboration environment. So in a modern communication and collaboration environment, Teams administrators like you are responsible for managing wide range of devices. So therefore, you really need to know about installing and managing Microsoft Teams clients on different operating systems and devices. So you should also be able to work with Microsoft Teams room systems as a solution that basically includes audio, video, and content sharing for conference rooms. So let's talk short about how to get a client for Microsoft Teams. So we have the desktop client. This is specifically available for the operating system like Windows 8.1 or later, Windows Server 2012 or later, 32 and 64 bits. Also for macOS 10.10 and later, and it's available for Linux on a Debian and an RPM format itself. So it gives you a lot of capabilities on the desktop side, really to install and configure the specific topic. Also obviously for the VDI environments, so that you can also work on a virtual desktop infrastructure with this topic. There's a specific switch that you can use it for all the users on a VDI infrastructure. As a team administrator, you can choose your preferred method to distribute the client installation files. For example, you can use Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager for Windows operating systems or JMF Pro for macOS, for example. On the other hand, there are several ways to deploy Teams desktop clients as a part of the Microsoft 365 apps for enterprise or over an MSI file, both in 32 and 64-bit for an IT bulk deployment, such as with the Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager, group policies, or any other third-party distribution mechanism for a broad deployment, or simply as a standalone exe installer for user installation. Note on this specific topic, the Teams desktop client on the Windows OS doesn't require an elevated permission, and every user can install the client to their specific profile path. On macOS systems, administrative permissions are required. The second thing I want to note out here is that the distribution of the clients through the software deployment is only for the initial installation of Microsoft Teams clients and not for further updates. Basically, the Microsoft installation for Windows provides a downloadable installer, 32-bit and 64-bit versions. You will see all the informations on the local app data, Microsoft Teams, local app data, Microsoft Teams meeting add-in, and app data, Microsoft Teams, and also the Squirrel temp file in the local app data. On a Windows Teams desktop client, the Net Framework 4.5 or later is required. If this is not installed on the PC, the Teams installer will offer it to install it automatically. That's really a great first experience that you can work with on this specific topic. For the Mac operating systems, the Mac users can install Teams by using a package installation file for a Mac OS computer. So the administrative access is required to install the Mac client, and the Mac OS client is installed to the applications folder like it's commonly used on a Mac operating system. To install it by using a pkg file, you need to perform the steps to download, obviously there, to double click it, and the wizard installation will complete the installation on the application folder part. On the other hand, on a Linux operating system, you can install it, as I already mentioned, over a Debian or a Red Hat Package Manager package that will automatically install the package repository. We have two package repositories, packages.microsoft.com, repos ms teams, stable main for the Debian part, and the jam repos /ms -teams for the RPM topic. Also you get here the signing key information and all the topic that you can verify that you install the correct package on your infrastructure. The Teams for the virtual desktop infrastructure is also there in the 32-bit version, 64-bit version. As you mentioned, or if you see before, we have it on a 2012 R2 server, and we can use it by default by a user installation with an MSI exec -e path to the MSI and the all user setting equals to 1, or per each per machine installation that you have it also with a double setting of the all users equals 1 section in that case. On the mobile clients, obviously you can deploy it on the Android. You can, for example, use the Google Play Store, obviously, and on the iOS you can use the Apple App Store, and you can also do that over the MDM solution over Microsoft Intune to really deploy it specifically to that topic. On the other hand, we have the capability to use it with different web browsers like Edge, Chrome and Safari, and you can just enter to the session and https teams.microsoft.com. Another important topic is that we need to discuss is if we plan to deploy the Teams desktop client, obviously it's a client that provides a full-featured experience as well as the web client as well. And you can install it in the auto start, that if you use it as a phone system, that the client starts automatically. That's a great opportunity to work with. Obviously, you can also use the desktop client in many other ways, but you can basically just start it in one option. And on the other hand, you can also, if you need a second screen, for example, if you want to change the organization or anything like that, you can open the web client or the applet what you can download, and you can start it as another user or with the same user to have different sessions based on your own profile or on a guest profile, for example. That allows you to really work very comfortable with the different clients and the different settings or scenarios you are in a corporation. If you want to use the Microsoft Endpoint Configuration Manager or Group Policy or any third-party distribution mechanism for a broad deployment, Microsoft, as I already mentioned, provided the MSI files that you can do that. On this specific slide deck, we have the things together that we can work with commercial, federal governments or specific security environments. That brings us to also a lot of capabilities to run it in a more security environments, and you have also the capabilities with a 32-bit and a 64-bit environments that you can work with this specific security requirements what you can see. Let's also summarize the desktop client's installation considerations. So Windows desktop client installed per user. Obviously you can install it without the administrative rights. On the Windows PC, as we already said, we need a Mac, we need the administrative rights for that. We have the minimum requirements that include the Office 2013 or higher, and the desktop client updates itself automatically. Obviously you can manually download the updates, and the desktop client updates are released every 2 weeks. Also for new features and the quality updates, this update process for Teams is basically different than the update process for the other Office apps such as Word and Excel. The desktop client updates itself automatically, and Teams checks for updates every few hours behind the scenes and downloads it and then waits for the computer to be idle before silently installing the update. Obviously you can do this process manually, as I already mentioned, and a very important topic is that Teams client on virtual desktop infrastructures aren't automatically updated the way that non-VDI team clients are. So we really need to think about it. Also we'll summarize the VDI components and all the stuff in the next slide. Because with the per machine installation, automatic updates are disabled. The Microsoft Teams web client, to just dig a little bit deeper into that client, is a fully functional client that runs on the most recent versions of all common browsers. So the web client supports also callings and meetings by using the WebRTC. So Teams requires no plugin or downloads to run in a web browser. The browser must be configured to allow third-party cookies. That's the only stuff what we need to do. As long as an operating system can run the supported browser, obviously the team is supported on that topic. The web client performs browser version detection upon connecting to Teams. So if an unsupported browser version is basically detected, Teams blocks access to the web interface and then recommends the user to download the desktop client or the mobile app itself. So that's basically the stuff really to summarize all the web features in that specific scenario. Also, let's go a little bit deeper in the planning of Teams mobile clients. So as we already heard, is the Google Play and the Apple App Store, and you can also work with the MDM solution that works, for example, with Microsoft Intune to plan all the stuff together. So also you can use the Apple Volume Purchase plan to get the Teams mobile app, and then you can deploy it to the eligible users or devices by Microsoft Intune, for example. Keep in mind that we need for the Microsoft Teams mobile apps the Android version 4.4 or later and the iOS 10.0 or later. And they are geared to on-the-go users participating in chat-based conversations and allowing also the peer-to-peer audio calls. The mobile apps obviously can be installed over the different stores, and when you just plan to deploy the Teams mobile client or organization, consider really any restrictions that could prevent you users from installing the client on a mobile client itself. For example, if your organization, an example, restricts software installation, so really make to ensure that the process is compatible with Teams itself. So last but not least, we go to Teams on the VDI components. So we need to talk about the virtualization broker, the virtual desktop, the thin client, and the Teams desktop app. So the virtualization broker basically is the resource and connection manager to the virtualization provider, for example, such as Azure itself. The virtual desktop is the VM that runs the Microsoft Teams client. The thin client is the endpoint that the user physically interfaces with, and the Teams desktop app, obviously we know that. So the virtual desktop infrastructure is a virtualization technology that hosts the desktop operating system and applications on a centralized server. So this basically provides you a fully personalized desktop experience to users with a fully secured and compliant centralized source that we see very often in our projects in secure client environments. So Microsoft Teams in a virtualized environment supports also chat and collaboration. And with the Citrix platform, calling and meeting functionality is also supported. Teams in a virtualized environment supports also multiple configurations. This includes, for example, VDI, dedicated, shared, persistent or non-persistent modes. Features are in a continuous development and are added on a regular basis by Microsoft, and the functionality will expand in the coming months and years maybe. So using the Teams client in a virtualized environment might be somewhat different from using it on a non-virtualized environment. So for example, some advanced features might not be available in a virtualized environment, and also the video resolution might differ, for example. It's also very important that you know which functionalities under Teams on a VDI with calling is not supported. The enhanced emergency services, the HD buttons and LED controls between the Teams app and devices, the background blur and effects, for example, broadcast and live events are not specifically supported on a VDI infrastructure. The location-based routing, LBR, the call park and the call queue itself. In addition to the chat and collaboration, Teams on VDI with calling meeting supports is, as I already mentioned, based on the Citrix based platforms. Supported features are based on the WebRTC media stack and the Citrix specific implementation. So you have an idea that you can really find it under docs.microsoft.com, Microsoft Teams and Teams for VDI. There's a complete installation guidance also for Citrix environments that you really have a good and great opportunity to gather the right configuration steps, registry settings and so on. Microsoft Teams gives you also the functionality to transform meeting spaces ranging from a small huddle areas to a large conference rooms with a rich collaborative Teams experience that's simply to use, to deploy and to manage. So you can start meetings on time with a one-touch join and then instantly the project to display and the room and share to the remote participants. Obviously you can select between different audio video peripherals from the partners of Microsoft, so like Yealink, Logitech, Creston or Polycom, Lenovo and HP, which all provides a lot of functionality and a lot of hardware that you can use in case of Microsoft Teams room deployment. As already mentioned, Microsoft Teams Rooms provides a complete meeting experience that brings HD video, audio and content sharing to meetings of all sizes. You have a lot of specific features that are in the game when you want to use the Teams rooms, like a touchscreen control panel to compute, a Microsoft Teams room application, a dock extender, peripheral devices like camera, microphone, speakers, external screens but in a maximum of 2, and an HDMI input, for example. Microsoft Teams rooms are designed for being used with the following technologies: with Microsoft Teams, Skype for Business Online, Skype for Business Server 2019 and the Skype for Business Server 2015. Earlier platforms like Link Server 2013 aren't expected to work with Microsoft Teams rooms. Microsoft Teams rooms can be purchased in several configurations, like bundled as a system with separate components or as a specific integrated unit. You will need to review the meeting rooms you have and decide where you want to deploy Microsoft Teams rooms and the specific peripheral devices that would be appropriate for the specific room size itself. When you want to deploy Microsoft Teams rooms in your organization, you must go through a detailed planning phase, including evaluating and testing several solutions for your organization to find obviously the best fitting conferencing experience for your users. The diagram in the slide shows the common required steps to prepare, deploy and maintain Microsoft Teams rooms in an organization. So for larger organizations, obviously you will most likely coordinate these activities across several teams. Let's go through the different steps. With the room inventory and capability planning, when you plan the Teams rooms inventory and capabilities, you should start with evaluating your existing infrastructure. What are the requirements of your organization for meetings? And you will need to understand the environments, like the room size, the layout, the purpose, and identify the capabilities you want to use for each room to have it in the future. When you create an inventory of the equipment and capabilities in each existing room, your requirements for that room feed into your device selection planning to create a rich conferencing solution. The audio and video capabilities that are needed for each room, as well as the room size and purpose, all play a really important role in deciding which solution will be the most optimal one for each room. Also, you must check and confirm that the room doesn't have an excessive echo, noisy air conditioning or furniture getting in the way of the equipment. So you should confirm there is enough power for the screens and Microsoft Teams rooms. There are many factors really to consider that your audio-visual team or specialized partner will be able to advise you on the specific part. So we go through the different topics as well. So the planning for the operations like monitoring, administrating and management tasks on an ongoing basis. So you need to be aware that what's happening when you want to manage Microsoft Teams rooms with your help desk itself. On the other hand, obviously we need to see about the procurement, the specific site readiness and the configuration and specifically the deployment. For the account provisioning, if you want to deploy a Microsoft Teams room, each Microsoft Teams room requires a dedicated and unique resource account that must be enabled for both Microsoft Teams or Skype for Business and additionally for Exchange. This account must have a room mailbox hosted on Exchange and be enabled as a meeting room in the Teams or Skype for Business deployment. So in Exchange you need to configure calendar processing so that the device can automatically accept incoming meeting requests, for example. Short side note, meeting scheduling features will not work without a device account. Obviously there are a lot of different stuff in the device software installation. For example, if you want to deploy a small number of Microsoft Teams room devices, like smaller 10, you can use an integrated solution deployed by a vendor image or configure settings that are required. If you have 10 to 50 devices from a single vendor, you can create a specific Vim-based image and capture a distribution image to be used for cloning distribution technologies. And if you want to use it for more than 50 Microsoft Teams rooms, you should use a task sequencer based software and a distribution platform such as System Center configuration, for example. And on the other hand, obviously, you should consider the specific device deployment or the specific peripherals you want to use, and obviously that you can test the whole rollout with the call quality dashboard and so on in the Microsoft Teams admin interface. Another important point is to manage your devices in Microsoft Teams. So you basically manage devices in your Microsoft Teams admin center under the devices in the left navigation, like conference phones, desk phones, and collaboration bars. For example, you can also, as an administrator, can view and manage the device inventory for your organization, and you can perform tasks such as update, restart, monitoring, diagnostics for devices. You can also create and assign configuration profiles to a device or group of devices. For a device to be managed in Teams, it must be certified for Teams and enrolled in Teams. So a device is automatically enrolled the first time a user signs into Teams on the device. So if an organization uses Microsoft Intune, devices are automatically enrolled in Intune, for example. So after the device is enrolled, the device compliance is confirmed and conditional access policies are also applied to the device itself. To choose the automatic update behavior for your device, you can do this over the following procedure. You go to admin.teams.microsoft.com, navigate to devices, phones or collaboration bars, and you can select one or more devices and select the update option. Under the firmware auto update, you can select between the following three options. So as soon as available, so the second newest device firmware update is applied as soon as possible after a latest update is released, or defer 30 days, like the second newest device firmware update is applied 30 days after the latest update is released, or defer 90 days, where the second newest device firmware update is applied 90 days after the latest update is released. So then just select update, and if for whatever reason you need to revert a device firmware update, you just need to reset your device to its factory settings and reset your device, obviously using the device instructions from your manufacturer. So these options, you have to have an automatic device firmware update procedure for your specific devices you are using in your organization. Obviously, you have also the option to manual update remote devices. So it depends basically on whether you have one or multiple devices selected. So the left image basically shows multiple device selected, or the image on the right shows a single device selected in the settings of our admin's Teams Microsoft.com site. You see that also under navigate devices, phones or collaboration bars, and you can select one or more devices and select to update that. Under the manual updates, select a schedule if you want to schedule the update for a future date and time. And keep in mind that the updates are applied at the date and time in the time zone selected in the time zone feature itself. Device tags in Microsoft Teams let you organize and more easily manage the devices you have deployed in your org. So with the Microsoft Teams Admin Center, you can really add one or more tags to devices, use filters to view devices that match the specific tag, and then you can perform actions to the device that you have tagged before. You can add a device tag to obviously more and one devices. So that's what I already mentioned. For example, you can assign the corporate tag to both phones and Teams room devices. And if you search for the corporate tag while in devices phones, you only get these phones returned what you have tagged before. So similarly, if you search for the corporate tag in devices Teams rooms, it's the same scenario what you can reach with that. Using the device tag management panel, you can, for example, see all your device tags. You can create multiple device tags easily and then assign them to the device at a later stage. Tags can be up to 25 characters. Remove device tags that are no longer needed. That's a best practice you really can go for. But before you can remove a device tag, you need to remove it
from all of the devices that has been added to it. The renaming of device tags is specifically when you rename a device tag, that change is reflected on all the devices it's been added to. So text can be up to 25 characters, as I already mentioned before. Let's conclude that or summarize that. So you can see all your device tags. You can create multiple tags. 25 characters is the maximum of that. You can remove it, but obviously remove it from all of your devices. And you can rename it, and obviously the tags can be 25 characters. So that's basically the rule sets that you really need to know about the device tags itself. In the next demonstration we will talk about device tags, how we can create, remove, rename device tags, and how to use it in filters to return the specific devices with a specific tag. In this short demonstration we will take a short look on the device tags, what are included right now. For example, we want to have a specific filtering method for IP phones, for user phones specifically, common area phones, conference phones, and so on, or also for Teams rooms. You can use the specific point here that we can go to actions, we go to the device tags, and we can say, for example, that is the device tags for sales, for example. We can also use it for marketing, or you have a different organization from an administrative perspective that you want to use this specific tags on that. What you can do basically on the specific levels is that if you have here a device, I have not the device actually here in my demo tenant, then you can assign obviously specifically the tags to this specific scenario. You can also have a multiple selection on this part to have this in place to work with this text. And you can also go through the filter. You can say, okay, I also want to filter on a specific tag, like here on the sales tag, for example, to have a condition that you have shown all the matches of these conditions. Obviously there is no device actually inside of that, but that's the basic thing on that part. To remove the tags, obviously that's not a big deal. Just go through the different devices you want to use and click on manage tags and remove it from these specific scenarios. So you have this functionality for IP phones and obviously also for the Teams rooms. So you see here the same functionality of the tags what you can use, and you can say, for example, I want to add the meeting rooms of building 1 and for example building 2, just to give you an example here on this smart feature what we can use to organize and to filter inside of our results here. So I can also do that here. For example, I want to tag that and I want to say I want to have only the devices of building 1, so I see all the Teams rooms then later on when I also add or remove specifically the tags to the devices that are associated with the specific building, for example, in this case. That's just a smart way to filter and to go forward. Just to summarize it, we have it on all the IP phones, we have it on Teams rooms. We can add, remove the tags as we want to filter all the results in our administrative unit here.
At least we need to talk about the configuration profiles in Teams. You can use configuration profiles to manage settings and features for Teams devices in your organization. You can create or upload configuration profiles to include settings and features you want to enable or disable, and then assign a profile to a device or a group of devices. To just create a configuration profile, you can just jump over to the left navigation to go to devices and the configuration profiles, enter a specific name for the profile, and if you want a friendly description, and then you can configure your profile, the specification what you want. For example, the change of device information, software updates, restart a device, view the device history, and different other topics that you can use specifically in that topic. Some device settings are display screen saver, brightness, backlight time, contrast, silent mode, office hour, power savings, and as I remember correctly, screen captures. So with this you can really go through that and to provide the configurations to your clients. That's a basic way really to have a centralized way of administration of your Microsoft Teams clients itself. In this last demonstration I will show you how to deploy a Microsoft Teams rooms with Microsoft 365 or Office 365.
Okay, let's deploy a Teams room system. Well, obviously not a complete one, but all the prerequisites you need to do on your Microsoft Online Services scenario. I have prepared this to be a bit more faster inside of this topic. So the first thing what we need to do is we need to connect all to Exchange Online, and we need to create a new mailbox in this scenario. So I have just prepared it and I enable this for a room mailbox account in this case. So I just click this here in, and we see that in the background we create this new mailbox for our new room environment. And in the next configuration we set the calendar processing exactly for that. To auto accept, for example, or how we can work with an add and organizer to a subject, or additional response information for that. So I just put this in and we let it work. It's already done here in that case. On the other hand, obviously we can set the MSOL user password to never expires. This is just a quite easy process. I put this in a variable and set this over the MSOL user CMD let that the password never expires in that case. Obviously you need to connect to the MSOL service in the beginning. The next topic what we need to do is to assign a license to that specific user. We can do this over PowerShell or even over admin.microsoft.com. That we go to the users, active users, and we are searching for exactly this user one. And I just jump over to licenses and apps, and I assign, in my case, the Microsoft 365 E5 developer license, which includes all the necessary stuff exactly for this topic. Obviously, due to the increased demand, it may take 24 hours to fully set up the Regal in Teams. That's also a topic that sometimes happens in that case, so just be aware about exactly this topic. Okay. The next step what we go through is, after licensing our user, that's here the process, just for you to inform, we can also see how is the state actually of this user. Just put it in the variable and just expand the registrar pool for this specific user. In the moment it's nothing done because the license needs to apply for that, but after applying that it will show you your registrar pool. On the other hand, what we then do is we enable the mailbox count, and we can also do that here over this commandlet. It's similar that we have used in the creation process. You can also update your password in that case, as you have seen here in this PowerShell CMD-let. So afterwards, when we go back to our environment and we go to the Exchange Admin Center, go through our receptions, go to the resources, we see our mailbox here for real -02 and from the mailbox type room. These are basically the steps you need to do to implement the Teams room system in the backend side on the Microsoft Online Services. So after completing this module today, we will tomorrow on day 4 focus on the specific management of collaboration in Microsoft Teams.
We have two learning paths on Microsoft Learn. The one is called Manage Team Collaboration with Microsoft Teams, and the second one is Upgrade to Microsoft Teams. I really highly recommend it to you, in specific when you want to apply for the certification for the MS700. This gives you deep intro and digging into the material. And yes, let's see tomorrow with the new material. Have a nice day.
Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us today. I hope our participants will really benefit from it. Also, as an additional resource, let me remind you that this series on managing Microsoft Teams MS700 will also be available for you to watch on demand at aka.ms/enablevts and aka.ms/training center. In fact, you can find more virtual training series available for your on-demand consumption there. Thank you to all the participants for joining us. Hope you enjoyed today's session. We'll see you again tomorrow. Goodbye.
นี่มันเป็นเทเบิลสแตนดาร์ดจำแต่ละโลกมันมีอะไรบ้างแต่ว่านี่คือสิ่งที่มันมีข้อมูลที่พักข้อมูลมาทีนี้เทเบิลไม่ได้เยอะนะเนี่ยแต่ว่าข้อมูลไม่ได้เข้ามาเยอะในไดเมนชั่นไม่หรอกมันอาจจะเหมือนแบบไม่ว่าไงคือมีบัคเก็ตแต่ว่ามันเก็บอยู่ในเทเบิลอื่นเนี่ยซึ่งเทเบิลอื่นในนั้นหรือไม่ก็ต้องอยู่ดีแล้วมันก็เป็นข้อมูลบัคเก็ตที่เป็นของก็คือมีอันตรงนี้มันจะเป็นอย่างเขาได้มันขั้นใช่ปะมันที่ดีพอร์ตมันจะเป็นเตอร์เลื่อนเร็วมันจะฟิลเตอร์ยี่สิบแล้วที่จะเอาส่วนจะเอาแบบเทียบจะหาตรงที่มันบอกว่า8 ตัวแต่มันเอาออกไปแล้วแล้วมันมองล่างมันน่าจะมีอีกชู่อยู่ข้างล่างบ้านแล้วเราก็ส่งไปให้ที่โรงงานแต่มันเชี่ยวที่แทนตรงนั้นแกที่ให้เขาทำอะไรนะให้เขาทำของบัคเก็ตใช่ป่ะ